All right, folks, you are listening to the Yishai Fleisher Show with Rabbi Mike Feuer. We're going to start in just a minute. Let everybody get on board. We're going to be talking about the last Torah portion. Rabbi Mike Feuer, get ready to talk about the last Torah portion in the Torah.
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay, good. Well, we'll still let everybody join up with us right now here live on Facebook, on Periscope, and on YouTube. Just going to wait for another few seconds. There's people starting to join, and I'd love to hear your comments while you're joining. So join up and let us know what you're thinking. And also, I have a new setup here in terms of my studio. Let me know if it's working mechanically, technically. I see some funky coloration maybe, or any other things. Please let me know if that's working for you. And looking forward to hearing from you. So go ahead and just comment on there wherever you are, and we're going to see it here. We're going to have a great chat. All right. And we have Rabbi Mike with us. Oh, there you are like that. And here you are like this. And This is the way I wanted. There you go. This is the way I wanted you.
I feel so dislocated.
All right, here we go. We're starting now together, everybody. Shalom. And 3, 2, 1, action. Shalom and welcome, everybody, to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting on Facebook, on Periscope, on YouTube, and on the Land of Israel Network. Today's show, this segment at least, is about the last Torah portion and Sukkot. And we are joined by our beloved Rav Mike Feuer, teacher extraordinaire at the Feuer Institute, a historian, and also a spiritual coach. Rav Mike Feuer, shalom and welcome to the show.
Shalom, Yishai. It's good to see you in your sukkah there.
Well, I'm actually, my sukkah is right. I'm not in my sukkah. This is actually my regular studio.
I feel so robbed.
No, my sukkah is right, it's right across. I'm looking right at it right now.
Okay.
But I jumped in to do a little bit of broadcasting with you. And our good friend Lou has already joined. He says, Shalom, Yishai and Rav Mike. Shalom, Lou. It's great to be with you, Rav Mike Feuer. I'm very excited to be with you today because I want to tell you that I made myself a little challenge, and that challenge is something I'm trying to fulfill today. And that is that, you and I, we go over the Torah portion throughout the year, but there's one Torah portion. There's a few, but there's one Torah portion that I could generally say I don't think I know it too well. And that Torah portion is the Torah portion of Zot HaBracha. Now, there's two reasons for that. One is that usually we read it at the very end of Sukkot in this separate but part of Sukkot holiday called Shmini Atzeret, which we celebrate as Simchat Torah. And during Sukkot, you're always going out and you don't have as much time to study, so I always miss it. And there's another reason why I don't think I know the Parsha so well is because in the Russian / part of the American tradition, you drink on Simchat Torah. And therefore, the Torah portion, which itself is a tricky Torah portion with very challenging words and concepts, plus add to that, a few shots of vodka, and Jews twirling around, and so easy to not exactly know what this Torah portion is about. But it's like the end of the Torah portion, the final words of Moses. So this year I took it upon myself as a challenge to study the Torah portion of Zot HaBracha in preparation for our show, and I really took it seriously, and so I'm very excited to discuss with you. Tell me what you think about not knowing Zot HaBracha.
Well, I think that you shouldn't drink during shul. But aside from that, little moral point. Listen, it's an easy one to get squeezed out. I mean, Ha'azinu is this sort of divine declaration of testimony. Breshit on the other side is, the beginning of everything. And this is Moshe's last bracha. He doesn't even bless everybody. We have it pales in comparison to Yaakov's bracha, which is much better known. I get it. And as you pointed out, the language is legendarily difficult.
Right. It's not even that the language is difficult. It's that the sense of the language, it's not tricky words like in Eov. It's just you're what is it?
Right. What exactly does this mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited about that. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. So we're in the book of Deuteronomy, okay, the book of Dvarim. and it's the last Torah portion in the book. It's called Forza Bracha, and it's chapter 33, the old log, and we start with the bracha which Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death, and it starts off tricky right from the get-go. Vayomer, are you there with me?
I'm with you.
It says, Vayomer Hashem Sinai ba. Hashem came from Sinai, or reached out to them from Sinai, greeted them at Sinai. Vizarach Meseir. He had a sunrise.
Shined out. Right.
He shined out out of Seir, Lamo. Hofia Mihar Paran. He appeared from the mountain of Faran or Paran. And now, Ata Mirvavot Kodesh. And now these thousands of holy things, which we explain to be his angels, are from his right hand, mimino, or from his right side. Esh dat lamo. It's a burning knowledge, a burning law.
Yeah, more law than knowledge. Although this word is actually one of the most difficult in the entire parsha. I mean, knowledge is with an ayin, so that's clearly not what it is.
No, I was talking like a knowledge, like a follow this.
Right,
this
dot,
pathway.
as in dot v'nimus, except the word dot, dalid, taf is not actually a Makori Hebrew word. It's Persian. Mm-hmm. There's no word in Hebrew for religion per se. So it's a big question, and it's written as esh dot, as one word, but we read it as esh dot lamo. This is where Rashi brings the very famous midrash about the Torah being written in black fire on top of white fire, in some attempt to understand what it means. Or Unglish says, that katav yimine migo eshetal raita yahavlona, that God wrote with God's right hand in fire. He wrote down the Torah in fire, and he gave it to us. So H dot, meaning a fiery religion.
So we're starting off with this verse, and one of the great explanations here is that God showed up and he first gave it to Seir. He tried to offer the Torah to Seir, that's to Esav and his progeny, and then they rejected it. Then he went to Paran, which is like the desert of Paran, which is like the Arabian desert, which is like the Arabs' Ishmael. He gave it to Ishmael, they rejected it. So Esav didn't want it, the Christian, Roman, Greek world. The Islamic world, the Arab world didn't want it. The Jews wanted it. And they wanted it, and they got from these thousands of holy angels, from his right hand, they got this religion or knowledge. You don't like knowledge. This pathway for his nation. Now, this concept that the other nations rejected it, that's a tricky concept. Because on the one hand, we say that the other nations rejected it. They could have had it, but they didn't want it because they didn't like the toughness of the laws, because that's what the first phrase is really about. It's like there's law here. That's really what the word dot really wants to say to you. It's like there's law. It's a fiery law. They didn't want it, but on the other hand, the Jewish people were also commanded to be like a light unto the nations, to bring it back to the nations who maybe rejected it early on. So this first phrase is like, they rejected it, it's for you, but it's a fiery religion.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it speaks, aside from the sort of rabbinic stance where they're always looking to elevate Am Yisrael. It's a very important just way of reading the midrash, right? And the fact that the nations of the world rejected the Torah in this midrash because it put limitations on their behavior, whereas Am Yisrael was willing to accept those limitations without really knowing what would any reward be. And aside from that, this, I think, speaks to one of those questions that comes up a lot when you speak to sort of liberal universalists. So if the Torah is important and God wanted to give it to the world, why give it to one people? Why not give it to the world as a whole? Right? Why does it have to be the special possession of Am Yisrael? And I think in that we see that the Torah is an evolutionary or long-term educational perspective. It's like it's hard enough to get a small group of committed people who, frankly, were desperate, had no better options. Let's remember, right? Seir is where Esav lives. He's at home. Paran is where the Bnei Ishmael live. They're at home. They don't really need somebody coming to their house telling them what to do. Am Yisrael is in the middle of the wilderness at Sinai. We just left slavery. We're told we're going to the land of Israel, but we've never seen it. This is God throwing us a lifeline. And we accept that lifeline, really not knowing, not knowing what it involves, and we're stuck with it. We're like, in all honesty, without not gonna soft pedal it. We're stuck with it, and because we're stuck with it, we decide to make it work. And lo and behold, it turns out that the Torah can pull out from the human soul and consciousness and creation an endless amount of light. But it's the type of thing that I don't know that you would accept it freely in a normal situation. I mean, the sages and many other midrashim talk about how we were all but forced to take the Torah at Sinai. So I think that that's part of what this midrash is speaking out, is that the Torah is so demanding that it couldn't have possibly been offered to the world as a whole, because they wouldn't have taken it. It was only a small people between slavery and settling in their land who would ever take such a risk of binding themselves in this way.
Mm-hmm. So the word binding is a great word, because the next phrase is Torah tziva lanu Moshe. God commanded us the Torah, morasha. It's an eternal inheritance for the congregation of Yaakov, and the Baal Turim. And this one's kind of obvious, makes a connection between the word morasha, which only appears twice in the whole Torah, and it's the other time that we're told about morasha is that the land of Israel is an eternal inheritance, and that now we're told that the Torah is an eternal inheritance. And the rabbis like to connect morasha to the word me'orasa, that there's an engagement. The Jewish people are engaged to the land of Israel, the Jewish people are engaged to the Torah. But I prefer to think of it that the word morasha is there to say that the Torah and the land of Israel are engaged to one another. And that's their fullest, most procreative. The land is procreative when it's got Torah in it. The Torah is fruitful when it's in the land.
Yes.
And so these two things are bound together.
Yeah, and I would say also adding the layer that you hinted at there, building on what I said, is that the truth is Eretz Yisrael is not an easy inheritance either. We see this today where there are parts of our society who were born and raised here, who are basically looking around and saying, what do I need this trouble for? What do I need this trouble for? There are other people who want the land. It's in this difficult region. Things are cheaper in Berlin, And the reality is that, like the Torah, like marriage, you have to be committed in order to derive from this relationship what it can really offer. If you got one foot out the door, or you even think that you could go, so then when it gets tough, people check out. But both Torah and Eretz Yisrael are such that God bound us to them, and they become our nahala. There really is our inheritance, from which, like you said, we can strike root and bear fruit.
Rabbi Mike, you're talking about commitment. One of the great secrets to commitment is that it's got to be something that you love. It's got to be something that you enjoy. It's something that in a sense you want to commit to over and over again. And joy is one of the great secrets to commitment. Like Torah's got to be. Now you're not serving the joy, right? You're not doing it because it's joyful. You're not doing it because it's fun. But if you're doing it and it's fun, and you can enjoy, being close to God and being close to the land of Israel. Like for me, a lot of times I meet people who say I'm here in the land of Israel because it's right. I'm like, yeah, but I also love it. I love it. And the reason I'm saying these things is because today is Chag HaSukkot. It's the Sukkot Booths holiday, and one of the toughest mitzvahs in the Torah. Now, today, as we're recording this live, today is also the Yortzeit, the passing day of the Gaon Mivilna.
Yeah.
Rabbi Nachman was yesterday. Today's Gaon
Nachman
Mivilna.
is yesterday.
Right. And I celebrated very seriously Rabbi Nachman's Yortzeit yesterday. And
hopefully not too seriously.
No, I actually took it seriously.
You took it seriously, but hopefully you weren't too serious. That was my point.
No, but I really actually, I think maybe more than any other day in my whole life, for Rabbi Nachman's Yortzeit, I took it seriously. And today is the Gaon Mivilna's Yortzeit. The Gaon Mivilna said that the hardest mitzvah in the whole Torah is to try to be happy for 7 days straight, because the Torah says you're supposed to be ach samech, only happy. Okay? And that's really one of the toughest mitzvot. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people have been telling me that they're feeling a little bit down, because we're in a closure here in Israel. We're not really allowed out of our like towns and not so much out of our homes and to visit other people. So a
I'm
lot
trying
of
not to
people
leave
are
my
down.
sukkah.
Right, yafeh. So I want to tell you that while I hear that, I want you to see some of the comments that I'm seeing right now from people. I'm putting up on the screen right now. Avinash says, "I love Israel, God's chosen people." Erica says, "Shalom, Rabbi. It's nice to make a show during the Chag." Torah! Exclamation point. Modim li simcha from Sweden. I have to go to work, but I'll listen later. Okay, great. I got happy remarks from Jay White, who says, "Shalom Aleichem, guys. Chag Samech, many blessings to you and the families." He talks about Mashiach coming soon. Michael says, "I'm from Papua New Guinea, watching you rabbis doing the show and teaching Torah during the season of Sukkot. Toda Rabbah." And more, I'm seeing just a lot of people here. Frank says, "Each morning I thank God that I'm in the land." I'm seeing just that there's this will to be joyful right now inside. People want to be joyful. They don't want to be brought down by the limitations. They want to be excited about it, and I think that's also eshdat. Eshdat means like it's got to be a burning thing. You got to be excited about it. You got to be excited about it and turned on by it.
I mean, I would add to that, if I may, that it's important to make a distinction between sason and simcha, right? That those are two words that we use a lot in relationship to the moed, right? The sason and the simcha, that the moedim are given in order, I would say, to have fun and rejoice. Meaning, sason can come and go, and I can get if it's hard to have sason in a time where many of the things, like, my kids are struggling right now. We usually do, trips, and we go to fun places, and there's like a big laser tag thing in my family. We like to play laser tag as a family on Chomoid. Yeah, it's a great spot over by Latrune. You ever go? Over by is it excellent? They let you do it's like an army setup with fake M16s, and it's fun. It's a fun place. Kids love it, get into it, but can't do any of that right now. And so I think that the sason piece, you have to be honest. I think it's important to be honest. Yeah, it's harder. Simcha is something else, though. Simcha is the sense of joy, which really I think is rooted in knowing you're doing what you need to do. Like, I often think about what it was like when I was in university, or certain jobs I've had in my lifetime, where you wake up in the morning and you say, "Yes, I have so much to do today." They're just that you feel a sense of purpose, that you're, like you said, you're connected to. It's fulfilling, it's enjoyable, but it's work. It's work. It doesn't just happen. It's not like sason. They just like, woohoo, this is so much fun. And so therefore, it's not only a choice you make once to be besimcha, but it is a constant commitment, and there are deep elements of gratitude and purpose and meaning. So it takes some work. It does take some work. It's an avoda.
It is an avoda, and I think that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us. Like, this is not an easy gig. This is a serious gig, and you're going to work hard at it. And he says like this. He says, now we're in chapter 33, verse 5. V'yihi b'Yeshurun melech. There was a king in Jeshurun. And interestingly enough, the Rabbi Yehuda Levy says that this king is actually the Torah itself, meaning to say there's a law. There's a law, and that's the king. But the simple meaning is Jeshurun, which is a name for Israel, which means like straight, very straight, or my little straight one. V'hi b'Yeshurun melech b'tasef rashe'am, when there was a convergence of the head of tribes. Yachad shiftei Israel, together the tribes of Israel. I heard a great explanation about this from the senior Rabbi Lau. One time I was at the president's house, and they were giving awards for science and Torah together. Rabbi Moshe David Tendler, my rabbi, was getting a award, and Rabbi Lau spoke. So Rabbi Lau says, what does this pasuk mean? V'hi b'Yeshurun melech. He means that's the time when there are kings. There are times when the world is ruled by kings. B'tasef rashe am, that's Politburo. That's when there's the elders are leading. Yachad Shiftei Israel, that's all the tribes of Israel. That's democracy. That's when there's people rule. He goes, in all of those systems, Torah can flourish. Torah can work in all of those various systems. It knows how to work within those systems. And he uses this verse to kind of prove that, like, whatever system we're doing right now, Torah can work inside of it. What do you think about that verse?
I think Rav Lau's insight is a very important one, especially in our day when there's a certain reflexive assumption on the part of many people that democracy is the only environment in which Torah can thrive, and it's not true, as we've spoken about. The Torah's notions of political systems are far more diverse. One of the things though I do love to picture here is that it's also a description of Moshe and the elders, and the fact that the receiving of the Torah necessitate the unity and a wholeness of the vessel of Am Yisrael, which was very unique, right? And when we work toward a more perfect society here, this is a lot of the work that we have to do. I think it's undervalued that we have not really tapped the power of the Torah to help us shape our political system today.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that, because Rashi says, "Bitasef," when there's a gathering. What's the gathering? Yachad ba'aguda achat, v'shalom beinehem hu malkam, v'lo kshesh machloket beinehem. It's dafka. When is God really king? When the Jewish people are together in one kind of, without erasing differences, but in one aguda, in one corporation unit.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, and there's peace between them. Then Hashem is our God.
Well, it makes me think of that line that we said all through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is, lasod agur achad lasod tzoncha b'lev shamleim, v'yaseh agur achad. That's the word. That Am Yisrael will make, or the whole world actually, will bind itself together into one unit in order to do your will with a whole heart. Is that's the purpose of unity. Unity for unity's sake is not a good thing, as we see in the story of the Tower of Babel, which I'm sure we'll speak about in a couple of weeks. But unity for the sake of expressing a higher vision of God's will, that's what its purpose is.
Do you think that we have unity, more of a unity during this separation, lockdown, but we're like unified through these other technological means or in other spiritual ways? I was hiking with Aryeh Abramowitz, one of the founders of the Land of Israel Network, and he gave me an insight that I thought was very fascinating. He said to me, "Did you think about the fact that the 3 festival holidays we've had lockdowns on all 3 basically?"
Oh yes.
On Pesach there was a lockdown. On Shavuot, I was in Jerusalem. It was practically a lockdown. There was
we had just come out. Right?
But there was nobody in the streets.
It was not full blown festival.
Oh, not even close. And now here, just in time for the big high holidays in Sukkot, boom, we're locked down. So like this year, we've really been more internally, like we've been more inside of our family units and those kind of things. Like, do you think that we are more together or less together? Now, if you do a lot of news watching, you probably think that we're in very bad shape between one another. But if you're out there on the street, I don't know if I find that to be true. I think that the news media is let's put it this way. I hope that this show inspires and makes people feel joyous, as opposed to what the news media I find is doing right now, which is really darkening the mood and making it look like there's much more division than there is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like the news and to a certain degree our political system are reflective of a certain strain within our sort of social psychology, which is that the doom mentality. And it's there, it's real. There's a challenge where a pandemic is unlike other natural disasters, where other natural disasters like hurricane or earthquake, sort of like force people to work together. Whereas in a pandemic, it's very easy to feel like everybody else is the problem. So I just want to keep to myself. What I'm finding is, I think, as you were hinting toward, is really there's also a reordering of the boundaries of community, right? And the full step into the Zoomiverse, into the world of virtual interaction, allows you, like you were just flashing up those, message on the screen from all over the world, is that there's an opportunity to build community on a scale which is sort of like heretofore been neglected, because I was more interested in my neighbors, or I was more interested in, what was happening in the street. And it's a challenge. I don't know, are we more or less united? I think a lot of it has to do with choice of what we want to be. But you're definitely right.
Frank is writing here. Frank says, when the Messiah is here and Israel begins to bring redemption to the nations, it will not be a democracy.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've spoken about this many times. To me, democracy is just a tool. It's a political system and the associated culture. It's not intrinsically bad. It's certainly better than many. Depends, I think, on what one means. Part of my vision of the Mashiach is a bit of an anarchist vision, meaning ultimately God wants us all to be agents and actors in our lives, and wants us to keep the Torah and to do what's right because it's right, not because of some external divine or social pressure, right? So on some level, it could be just an anarchist world in which everybody does what's right, everybody under their own vine and their own fig tree. In terms of how we actually organize as a whole as a society, I mean, the Torah certainly conceives of separation of powers.
And isn't that nice that fits well with that verse that I said before in that explanation about the different systems? It's important to also remember, though, that Judaism is, on the one hand, a monarchy, on the other hand, always a democracy. There's always elements where like the people are like, no, we can't accept that edict, or other things where like there's always an element that the people elect and that the people bring up, and that somebody rises from the people. Like there's an element. It's important to remember that it's not top down. That would just be kind of anti-Jewish in the sense that Jews aren't a people that you just kind of send commandments down and they just accept it blindly. That's not our thing. Starting from Abraham, who already
from Adam.
All right, let's keep going. Speaking of, we got the tribes of Israel here. We got Reuven. He's the firstborn, and he's blessed that he kind of won't leave the fold because of the incident with Bilhah, probably. But in any case, he's just blessed that he'll live and he'll have a large number of adherents. And in fact, Reuven was one of the big tribes. But the next one is to Judah, to Yehuda. And it says, V'zot Yehuda, v'yomar shma Hashem kol Yehuda. Please God, hear the voice of Judah. Why? Because he yadav ravlo, he needs his hands for fighting. Ve'ezer mitzarav tiyeh, and a helper from his hardships you shall be to him. And Rashi basically puts it out that this is for the kings of Judah that go out to war. That need bravery, that need to be strong. Hear their prayers. Hear the prayer of, for example, Hezekiah when he prayed not to be taken by Sancheriv. Is that how you say it in English?
I've always said Sancheriv, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
So here because they're the leaders, they need strength, and they need to be heard in a time of war. I just want to tell you that I was in Seattle, one of my favorite cities outside of the land of Israel, and my one of my favorite cities in America is Seattle, and I was at a shul called Ezer B'Tzarot. That was the name of the shul. Ezer
That's a good name.
B'Tzarot.
That's a good name.
A helper in hard times, and they called it for short Ezi Bezi. Okay, that's what they call it, Ezi Bezi. And this reminds me of that Ezer Mitzarav, like rulers. For example, look at Prime Minister Netanyahu or President Trump. No matter what you think about them, they are on the one hand doing.
It's a hard job. It's a hard job.
It's a hard job, yeah, and they need help in troubles, and people are always trying to bring them down.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We've spoken about it, before, and I think that it was a terrible display this week with President Trump's announcement of having COVID. So people don't appreciate, first of all, just that they're also human beings, right? And deserve, as human beings, a basic respect. But even more profoundly, that they represent an office whose stability is in the interest of all involved. Mm-hmm. And even if you feel that each of them has degraded the dignity of that office or its sanctity or however, whatever, and I might not disagree. Nevertheless, you're not actually helping the situation by tearing it down further.
But you're pointing out to some of the negative stuff. I saw a lot of positive stuff. I saw the chief rabbis of Israel at the Western Wall bless President Trump for a speedy recovery by name. They called him Donald John Ben Fred. They used his father's name. They literally said that at the Western Wall. Why
they use his father's ceremony?
Name? I don't know. I think it's something to do with Jews or Gentiles. I don't know, but they use his name. But his mother's name is Mary also, I saw that, and I saw a big sign of, people came out and said, hey, you know what I mean? Let's bless President Trump. By the way, just as a total political parenthetical thing, just for a second, I went to the New York Times on my Google app, and it was just like, he's getting worse, and the president, and he's in trouble, this and that. I was like, forget you, New York Times. I can't trust you at all. And another parentheses, they just hired Peter Beinart to be a columnist.
On the weather, opinion writer.
Contributor, right? So that's not great either. But anyway,
I saw someone say, thus proving the old adage that when you get to the bottom, keep digging.
Anyway, so I was like, forget this, and I went to President Trump's Twitter, and there he is, smiling on a video, explaining what his situation is. And I wrote a tweet saying, I'm so glad that there's a way to get past media bias and hear from the newsmakers themselves. Now, obviously, they're showing you their bias, and the algorithm is showing you its bias, and there's tons of biases all around. It's very hard to get neutral facts, but
there's no such thing,
right? But I was happy that I was able to bypass whatever the New York Times wanted to feed me. When you read that New York Times article, it's like, he's sick, he's very sick. Third paragraph, yeah, he's not really sick. And I'm like, what is this? Like, what are you just trying to like toggle my emotions? And
yes,
yeah, right.
Yes, they are. Yes. By the way, on that note, you should watch The Social Dilemma.
Yes,
on
I've been
Netflix.
Watching it a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
I watched it with my older children to try to drive home to them how dangerous a world it is that they're living in.
Yeah.
So it's worth checking out.
If we had to say it in a short form, The Matrix has you. Okay?
Yeah.
That's exactly.
And it's way more sophisticated than you think.
Absolutely.
And doesn't have your best interest at heart.
Right. It does not. And it is also, more than anything, it's hidden. It's not telling you what they're doing. Meaning to say they're hiding from you the truth of what they're doing with your information.
I just kept thinking of that classic Bob Marley line. It's just a machine that makes money.
Tov. Next one is Levy, the tribe of Levy.
Oh, thank God.
Yes, they get a lot of
press, a lot of ink here.
Press here from Moshe Rabbeinu, who's a Levite. There might be some
nepotism,
some nepotism a little bit, and it says Levi amar tumecha veurecha leish chasidecha. Very beautiful rhyme, kind of couplet there, which basically says your Urim v'Tumim. That's the breastplate that gives prophetic information. Leish chasidecha, to your trusted one, to your beloved one. Is that Aaron, or is that the continuing line of the Levites? And then it has a powerful phrase. He says to his father and his mother, I haven't seen you. I don't see them. And his brothers he did not know. He didn't know his children. Because they kept your sayings, your commandments, and your covenant they held fast. There's different explanations for that, including during the times when Levi was the tribe that had to fight the idolaters, for example, in the tribe of Shimon, and other explanations that no, because you serve in the temple, sometimes you leave your family and you leave all that you know, and you just basically have to go to the temple service and work there as opposed to being at home with the family. But the point is, there's something about Levi which he knows how to disconnect from his own family, and at the end. It says that he's the teacher. They're going to teach. The Levites are the teaching clan. They're the ones that spread Torah in the nation. And it finishes off with a strong kind of sentence. Barech Hashem chelo. Hashem give blessings to his armies, to his fight. Oh, and Rashi also explains that part of the fight of the Levites is not just to teach Torah. It's also the Maccabees. The Kohanim within the Levites were the Maccabees, and they ended up, being, like we said before, the kings of Israel. They were fighters for Israel. So there's a blessing in there for the strong fight as well.
Whenever I hear this bracha, I think of the halacha on the Rambam at the end of the, I think it's the end of Matanot L'Kahuna, or it might be Matanot L'Evyonim, But in the end of one of the laws, I think it's actually of tzedakah, where he says that Levy represents Mesirut Nefesh, an absolute self-sacrifice for the Word of God in Torah. And he says that anybody whose heart moves them can essentially do the same. Because he says, the Rambam famously says it's forbidden to rely upon charity in order to learn Torah. He says, but if a person wants to completely devote themselves, that there is a portion of Am Yisrael who deserves to be supported in that pursuit. And it just always strikes me, and I see it in my life over and over again, that real Torah learning comes from Mesirut Nefesh. It just comes from self-sacrifice. Even if it's something as simple as getting up a few minutes earlier so that you can just learn a few lines of the Parsha. I'm not talking about world-class scholarship only. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. But if a person wants to understand how is it that they're going to be koneh Torah, how they're really going to make Torah part of their life, just remember that whatever you have to sacrifice for is actually yours. That which comes easy, you don't really own.
Right. And there's a phrase like that we learned, you and I. There's a pasuk. What is the pasuk? Zot Torah. What is it? The person that dies in the tent.
Oh yeah, Adam kimet ba'oel.
Yeah, right. Adam kimet ba'oel. It's like, and the rabbis say, this is the Torah. Person who dies in the tent, he self-sacrifices himself all the way to learn in the tents of Torah. Very good. Okay, Benjamin.
My name is not Benjamin.
No, we're talking about the tribe of Benjamin now. And interestingly, the tribe of Benjamin gets a bracha about having the temple in its portion. That's what we learn. Right. Shel Binyamin oseket bebinyan Beit HaMikdash bechelko be'Eretz Yisrael. Okay. The reason Binyamin is talked about here, as Rashi says, is because you had the Levites and the priests who who work in the temple, and then, but where is the temple itself? It's in the tribe of Benjamin, and it's very interesting. The phrase is ubein ktefav shachen, between its shoulders it resides, and the explanation there is that it's the Temple Mount is lower than the mountains around it, and even there's a cameo appearance of Gush Etzion here, where it says that David HaMelech thought to build it in the Eitam, in Ma'aya, and Ein Eitam, the Mayan of Eitam, which is here overlooking Bethlehem. However, God said to him, basically, put it lower. It's got to be lower. It's got to be in a place between the high mountains of Judah and Benjamin. And
there's also a guest
Mountain.
appearance of the idea of fatback.
What's a fatback?
Fatback, well, Rashi says.
Am I going to get in some kind of PC trouble by talking about this?
Probably not. No, but anybody who lives south of the Mason-Dixon line knows what fatback is, right? Rashi, right at the end of the Rashi says there's nothing more tasty in an ox than shoulders. Like, that on a pig, the fat back is that piece of fat that's right on the back between the shoulders. So,
fat back. Of course.
That's what it is. It looks, you can if you're walking around North Carolina or South Carolina, it looks like a block of butter. You can just buy it in the store. Okay,
I just want to say that if you're listening to the show, please give a hashtag, send out a hashtag fatback, okay, and I'll know what you're talking about.
And we'll know what you're talking about.
Frank says that just to comment that Rav Mike's volume is better than Yishai's. Thank you, Frank, and I'll.
And you can't even see my belly, but you're correct. My volume is quite a bit larger than Yishai's.
That's right. Don't talk about the fatbacks. Okay, here we go. Let's keep going. And now there's a blessing to Yosef. This is a very long blessing and very interesting blessing. Yosef has really two sons, and that is Ephraim and Menashe. And there's interesting words here. In Yosef's blessing, there's a lot of paradoxes. It says, Mevorechet Hashem Arzo, his land is blessed by God. Mimeged shamayim mital umitohom rovetz tachat. So the word mimeged is a very tricky word. It sounds like the word, to me, it always sounds like the word mineged, which means paradox or contrary to. But the Rashi explanation is mimeged is from migadim, which are treats,
Right, the
sweets.
sweetness.
Right. So I actually read it both ways, right? So there's the paradox between heaven, there's a blessing from heaven above and from waters that come from underneath the earth. And then later on, it's going to compare the fruit yield of the sun fruits as opposed to stuff that grows from the moon.
By the moonlight.
By the moonlight. And that's like, what do you call it? Zlat, what's it called? Like pumpkins and things like that.
That's what Rashi
Right?
says.
That's what Rashi says. And then it says from the peak of ancient mountains and the goodness of the Gvaot Olam, the
Eternal hills.
the eternal hills. And there is a great town in Israel called Gvaot Olam, which is a farm in Itamar. Amazing stuff. Umi Meged, and still from the
I
goodness.
plan on retiring to a retirement home called Givaot Olam.
Gvaot Olam, is that right?
I know.
There is
Sounds
a place
good,
like Gvaot Olam makes great cheese, great eggs. And
Yeah.
And finally, there's this great word, Ratzon Shochni Sochni Sne, which is the will of he who dwells in the
Bush.
in the bush, in the burning bush, right? That's the
Well,
kind of
snap
stuff
is
we know.
bush, but yeah, but likely reference there.
Right. Okay. So and then, well, who, it's interesting. Why would that, like, to me, like, it's a very personal thing, the burning bush. It's a very personal thing between God and Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did he put it up on the issue of Yosef? And Rashi basically says why, because of the next verse, Bechor Shoro Hadarlo, his kind of firstborn ox is his
Glory.
glory, and he says that's Joshua. That's Joshua. That's Joshua, and Joshua, he is and now you understand maybe why these blessings are coming onto Joseph, because he's actually the continuation of Moses here, is Joshua from the tribe of Moses. And so like if we had before like extra words for Levy, there's a lot of like extra blessings for this guy who's supposed to take over for Moshe Rabbeinu and bring him into the land. Rashi then says something very amazing. He says, who are these afsei aretz, these like weak people of the land? Who are they that are going to be brought down by this ox, this Joshua? That's the 31 kings. And then Rashi asks a question. He's like, were there really 31 kings in the land of Israel? No. It's just that everybody from around the world wanted to purchase a piece of property or have a palace or have a castle or have a church.
A summer apartment.
A summer apartment, but they wanted something in the land. Now, if you go to Jerusalem today, you see the Ethiopian church and the German, the Lutherans, and you'll see the Catholics, and you'll see the what do you call them? The Mormons.
Huge Vatican building across from Newgate.
Right, and then that's I think that's a French building, and then
That's French hostilities, but the Vatican headquarters is next to it.
Oh, right, I did not know that. Okay, and then not to mention Muslim sites and other people. And what about the Baha'i in Haifa? Like everybody from around the world wants a stake in the land of Israel. They know it. Like this Rashi is like something that's just so true. And if you just walk around Israel, you're like, why do all these other countries have or other religions and other peoples have such a stake in this land? That's something that people, I guess, that are connected to any spirituality understand the power of the land of Israel and Jerusalem.
Yes, it's always been a bit of a sore point for me that, there's been like, these questions over the last couple of years about the Russian compound and the Migdal David, up on Har Zion, and just, it irks me. Forget the fact that I believe it's our land and like, what are you doing here? What irks me is that people say, well, there's a legitimacy. They own these properties. Okay, they own them. Why do they own them? Why does the Greek Orthodox Church own all the land that the Knesset's built on? Making us, as far as I know, the only country in the world that actually leases the property that its Capitol building is built on. Because they came here and conquered it. Because they were trying to replace us.
Right.
And why their conquest should be any more legitimate than our return home through conquest, that just simply smacks me as hypocrisy at best.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. It's absolutely a great point.
It always bothers me. Sorry to bring it up.
No, and you are right. You come into this land and you're like, why are there all these foreign like control of different things here in the land? All right. Out of all the blessings, I was most struck by the next one, and that is actually to Zvulun and Issachar. Like, how many of us really feel like we know a lot about Zebulun and Issachar? Okay.
Well, this is what we know about them.
Right.
It's bracha, interestingly
Right.
enough.
But you ask the average person, are you really connected to Zebulun and Issachar? So Zvulun and Issachar.
Probably not.
So basically, it says, Zvulun, be happy with your trips out, and Issachar, be happy with your stay in the tent. And we learned from this that there was a deal between Zvulun and Issachar. Zvulun was the trader, was the ship-going trader, but the money that they brought in, they would give a portion of it to Issachar so that they can learn Torah. And the deal was, you learn Torah, and I get a portion of that, and I feed you in this world. But like your Torah is partially my Torah, even though I subsidize it. That's really what I do, which is a very beautiful thought. But then the next line, I want to tell you, Rav Mike, I felt like I learned a verse that I didn't even know existed. That's what happened, really.
Whoa.
I was like, I must be drunk every year exactly at this line, because I was blown away by this line. Amim, nations, har yikra'u, are called to the mountain. Sham yizbechu zivchei tzedek. There they will offer up
Righteous
righteous offerings, right?
Uh-huh.
And Rashi explains two different things. He says, one is that Issachar is going to be so learned that their expertise is going to be what's the word? There's a fancy word for figuring out the months.
Intercalation
of
the calendar.
Of the calendar. And therefore, you're going to know these nations that come up to the Temple Mount. That's actually the tribes of Israel. And you're going to know, because of Issachar, when to go up to the Temple Mount. But the other explanation is, so the Torah learners are the ones that set the calendar, and then you know when Sukkot is really. The other explanation is, no, it's Zvulun. And when they go out to do business, like I got a good friend named Baruch, who has an amazing business of bringing in these barbecues, these
We've mentioned it before. Sure.
Right. So the smoker is this what's called Traeger smoker, right? It's a wood pellet fire burning barbecue thing. But through his business of bringing these things in, he's always bringing people to Jerusalem, and that's exactly what it says. It says they'll come to do business with you, like the UAE will come to do business with you, and then they're going to be like, if we're ready in Tel Aviv or Yaffo, let's go to Jerusalem. You know, I'm kind of curious. You go to Jerusalem, you see the Jewish people serving God. You're like, wow, that's
the way to go.
That's something powerful. And then these people either convert or become close to Judaism, and they offer up offerings of righteousness. And usually during the Sukkot holiday, we read that on the first day, the nations come, as in the book of Zechariah tells us, the nations of the world come to Jerusalem to offer up their sacrifices, and if you don't, you're really going to miss something. You're going to be punished through it. But the point is that Rashi says it's Zvulun's business that actually draws a spirituality into this world, because people come and actually witness Jerusalem. So two different explanations of who comes up to Jerusalem and who offers up sacrifices of righteousness, and because of whom. Is it Issachar, or Zvulun?
That's very beautiful, and especially this idea that it's business which sort of draws people to holiness is an important one for Sukkot, because, like, what are we doing here? Like, here I am sitting in my little wooden hut. Maybe I should give you a quick tour.
Sure.
As long as we're live, can I do this without destroying all the wires? Let's see. Our Sukkah, thank God, is quite nice. It's a little hard to see from the glare.
Yes.
You got an idea.
Sure.
We sleep 4 or 5 people here every night.
Mm-hmm. We sleep 5 every night.
Well, we've gotten to the point where, thank God, I mean, all the kids can't really all fit at the same time. I keep expanding, but also, my teenage girls stay up way later than I do. So, like, I I don't need anyone coming back to the Sukkah at 2 a.m. But what I was going to say is that a Sukkah is an amazing thing because it transforms the mundane into the holy. Suddenly, eating, sleeping, sitting and talking with the kids becomes a mitzvah because you're doing it l'sheva sukkah, to dwell in the Sukkah. And it's a parallel, of course, famously to Eretz Yisrael, because being in Eretz Yisrael, your mundane actions become holy. And in that sense, we understand what the purpose of Am Yisrael is in the world, which is not to build some sort of alternate existence where you can leave the world and get in touch with the sacred, but rather to sanctify the world which we've been given, which is why I find that this line is such a powerful expression, not only of our purpose as a people, but of this holiday in particular, is that it's specifically through the physical that we achieve our mission in the world, and not otherwise.
Right. And basically we create a physical plant to bring in spirituality.
Yep.
And not try to run away from the physical to reach spirituality. I think we it's really, if it's compared to Buddhism, it's to leave the physical and to find nirvana, as opposed to actually create a physical plant for God's presence in this world. Let's go to the last. The other tribes are also blessed, and they're all very important.
Shall be
but
blessed.
let's go. That's right, amen. Let's go to the very last verse of Moses's speech. This is his last verse. This is what he's going to say to you, and he says, "Ashrecha Yisrael, praiseworthy are you, Israel. Mi kamocha, who is like you? Am nosha b'Adonai, a nation that is redeemed, saved by God. Magen Ezrecha, he protects you. He is your defender. V'asher cherev gavatecha. This is an interesting one. Which he is your sword. He is your sword, meaning to say you'll fight through him, and he's the sword of your pride. Meaning to say, he is your battle maker, and you can be proud of him as your sword. V'yakachashu oivecha lach. Your enemies are going to kind of deny it. They're going to say, nah, you're just an occupier. Nah, you're no better than the Nazis. Ooh. Nah, all kinds of stuff like that. No, the Tanakh isn't real. Your history is actually bad. These are not the droids you're looking for. And
all those good things.
Yeah. Right? Ve'ata, you Israel, however, al bamotemo tidroch. You got to step on their high places. And my kids know the famous midrash, which I love so much, which is that when Mordechai is being lifted onto the horse by Haman, the midrash says that Mordechai kicks Haman in the face. So Haman's like, hey, it says in your Torah, bin pol oivecha al tismach, when your enemies fall, don't rejoice. So then Mordechai is like, no, that's about a Jewish enemy, about people like you, Amalek face. It says, Vatal b'motemo tidroch, you got to step on their high places, and that's why I kicked you in the face. So my kids know that one by heart. So I just don't want them growing up not understanding that. But that's the final word. Final, I would say, somewhat warlike, or at least competition-like, phrase of Moses before he turns and takes care of his final business. But those them be fighting words, no?
That's strong words. They're strong words. And I would say what I take from it right now, just to add to what you're saying, is that Ashrecha. I mean, listen, Moses hasn't had an easy life. He's not had an easy life. Certainly not since he was a baby. And Am Yisrael hasn't had an easy history. And yet it's important to be able to look at our status as Am Yisrael and say, Ashrecha, there's nothing else I would rather be than a member of Am Yisrael who is able to fulfill this divine mission, which is a very strong note to end on as well.
That's right. And being a good leader, Moshe Rabbeinu is going to finish the business off properly. Either he buries himself or God buries him. And he dies at 120, full of vigor and strength. The Jewish people cry for him. And then it says, but a good leader leaves the next leader intact, ready to go.
Right.
It says, "Yeshua bin Nun maleh ruach chachma." Yeshua bin Nun was filled with a spirit of wisdom. Ki samach Moshe yadav alav, because Moshe Rabbeinu put his hands on him and passed over the prophetic energy. Vishmu elav bnei Israel, the children of Israel hearkened to him. V'yasu kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe. They listened as
Moshe commanded them.
As Moshe commanded. And there has not risen v'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael ke Moshe. There has not risen a prophet like Moshe in Israel. Asher yado Hashem panim el panim, which Hashem knew face to face. And all of the then it goes on to detail shortly the miracles that God did through Moshe's hand to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, and the great strength, the strong arm, the great events or great fears. I don't know how you want to translate the great miracles of the desert. Asher asa Moshe, that Moshe did le'enei kol Yisrael, that Moshe did in the eyes of all of Israel. And here we just have a few more minutes left, Rabbi Mike. I just want to ask you, you would think that the Torah would kind of not use Moshe's name in the last verse. You would think that it would be a more general phrase, and God, and this is God's will through written in this Torah that he gave to you, and that's it. Like, leave, and there'll be a light unto the nations, and the world will be, rectified. No, the last things was the redemption that really Moses' hand, God's miracles through Moses' hand happened in the desert, out of Egypt, and in the eyes of all of Israel that Moshe did. I would have maybe taken some of that out and put in just like, and God shall dwell alone in one of these verses. Like, why do you think the Torah ends, and obviously I'm asking these questions in order to gain a greater understanding, not to doubt the Torah. I'm just saying, like, it's surprising.
I mean, I hear your surprise. I think that, to me, the first answer is because it's very important that the Torah remain accessible. And if it had ended on this sort of lofty note you're speaking about, it risks becoming unattainable and therefore irrelevant. And Moshe obviously is a lo kam b'Yisrael ke Moshe od. I mean, he was on a far higher level than any of us could imagine. Aval b'gam hu basar, v'shegam hu basar. He's also flesh and blood, meaning Moshe represents what a human being is capable of. And as such, he also represents each and every one of us, right? Which is, I think, part of the reason that it ends here. It's accessible, it's personal. We relate to people. Also, I think that there's an emotional hook here. I always get a little bit teary-eyed at this point when we reach this point in the reading where it's like, wow, like it's over. It's over for Moshe. He worked so hard. The last thing is, I think, encoded in Rashi, and it's a very profound midrash that Rashi brings here at the end, where he notes that what exactly is this Asher asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael? What's the act? This great yad chazakah, this mighty hand, which Moshe. Notice that yad chazakah usually refers to God, and here it's referring to Moshe. So Rashi says, well, what was that? He says, shenasu libo lishbor luchot lifneim. That his heart lifted him up, meaning he had the courage to break the tablets which God had given him, and God agreed, right? It says v'skima data kodesh baruch hu l'dato, right? And God's sort of consciousness agreed with his consciousness. Like it says, asher shibarta yashakocha shavarta. But look at what Rashi's saying. Is at the end of the Torah is the fact that Moshe wasn't afraid to break it. But this is a living Torah. And the big danger is if you think that this is the end of the story, then I have failed, says God. This is the beginning of the story. Just like the last word of the Tanakh, which was written by Ezra Sofer, who has a lot of parallels to Moshe, is Vayal, let them go up, right? If that's the end of the story, you close the story, you go back to bed, you never go up. If it's the beginning, you take it as a call to action. And that's what this is. This is a call to action. Moshe says, listen, I'm done. Now here, take this, and you do. You write the next chapter. And I think if it ended with God, I think that would be an impossibility. And so the next best option is to end with Moshe, who was just slightly more accessible.
So you're saying, all right, so it's like, hey, I did something. You got to get up and do something.
Yeah, you write the next chapter.
And rewrite the next. And it's very, and speaking of next chapter, what's so beautiful about Simchat Torah, which we're going to be celebrating this Shabbat, is that right when we're done with this, it peels off into two avenues. One avenue is that the last letter of the Torah is followed by the first letter of the Torah, which, by the way, the last letter in the Torah is Lamed, and the first letter of the Torah is Bet, which together spell the word Lev, which is heart, okay? So you kind of like, the Torah is about heart. That's what really brings it together. So one pathway is right back where we started from, and the other pathway is the Haftorah, which is Joshua. So the linear track. So there's a circular track and there's a linear historical track. I like to say that one is an analog watch, where like you got to the end and you're right back where you started from, and one is like a stopwatch, a digital watch, which it starts from zero and goes all the way to Mashiach. And we Jewish people live with both of those kind of times. One is circular, back to Bereshit, back to Pesach and those holidays and all that. And at the same time, no, we're not like just sitting there going back over and over again. Right, we're going somewhere. And that's why the next thing that we read, and Joshua took over, and this is what he did. And that ties in very beautifully to what you were just saying, which is what's the next chapter. But that next chapter has got to be informed by those original chapters that we go back to every single year.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be a continuation of the same story.
Rav Mike Feuer, our time is done for now. I want to first thank you very much, and I want to recommend that everybody check out your website, which is jewishstory.co. Okay, and you also have a new website, which is ravmike.com. Is that right?
That's right. That is correct.
So, and you can find both your history podcast there, your other lessons, and also your spiritual counseling that people can join and really connect with and get a lot from. So check that out at jewishstory.co or ravmike.com. I also want to thank all of our sponsors. We have some new sponsors, Rav Mike. We have Blessed by Israel, okay? If you type in Blessed by Israel, you'll find awesome products from the land of Israel, including olive oil. And you need olive oil for Parshat Bereshit. So check out Blessed by Israel, and it'll really, nothing connects you more than actual physical products from the land of Israel. That's really sweet. A great news channel that puts out our show is jewishpress.com, and they're sponsors of the show. So thank you very much, Steve, and the editorial staff at jewishpress.com. And we have a new a sponsor of the show, which is Salves of Jerusalem, salvesofjerusalem.com. Great stuff for your beard, great stuff for your skin, all from the land of Israel. It goes into your bloodstream, so you're like more holy, more tied to the land. It's beautiful stuff, and it's called Salves of Jerusalem. And salves sounds a little bit like salvation. So, you see what I'm saying? So a little bit of salvation from Jerusalem through Salves of Jerusalem. Our good friends at HebronFund.org keep the forefathers and mothers safe and beautified and honored in the beautiful town of Hebron. So check out Hebron Fund and keep Hebron safe and strong and continually open for visitation of all faiths. And our good friends at Tchelet.com, makers of the true blue Jew. The biblical blue is back. And so check out Tchelet.com. Rav Mike and I are not only spokesmen, but we're also, what's the word? We're
on the team? We're team members.
No, there used to be like a commercial for a guy who was balding, and he's like, I'm not only the president, I'm also a client. So I'm just not promoting Tchelet, I'm also a client, believe me. There you go. It's a very central aspect of our life, a very important thing. So check out the Tchelet Biblical Blue is back. And check out my website, which is YishaiFleisher.com, for more ways to connect through shows, podcasts, articles, videos, and more. And, of course, the Land of Israel Network, which is a host to all these wonderful shows. Rav Mike Feuer, I want to wish you a great new beginning with Parshat Bereshit. Looking forward to another great year of learning with you. And enjoy the rest of Sukkot. And happy Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah.
That's right. Gam Lamar, Chag Sameach. It's always great to see you.
All right, folks. God bless you. Rav Mike, thanks again. And thank you for being with us wherever you are. Lots of love and lots of blessings from the land of blessings. Do me a favor, write a good review wherever you listen to podcasts or other things. And, of course, send me an email, YishaiFleisher.com or Yishai@thelandofisrael.com. We thank you because, really, you're the greatest sponsor when you're watching the show. And our big sponsor is the God of Israel, who's broadcasting 24/7. All you have to do is tune in, and blessings from the land of blessings, and shalom.